tell us a little bit about your background, because people know that this episode is about Skinwalker Ranch. They also know you from the Skinwalker TV show. So maybe tell us how your relationship with Skinwalker Ranch started.
Yeah, so I didn't come to Skinwalker Ranch looking for the paranormal. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started many different businesses, and one of the ones that I owned at the time was a small luxury boutique hotel here. I had several properties, and one of them happened to be here in Roosevelt. And when Brandon Fugel purchased the ranch, he sent Jim Morse out to the basin to start figuring out, what exactly he'd purchased and what the next steps forward would be. And Jim happened to stay at my hotel. And in the process of visiting, he found out I was a licensed contractor here in the state of Utah, that I had an extensive background in construction. And so he asked me if I'd be willing to come out and do a property inspection. Growing up in the basin, I'd heard, all the crazy stories about Skinwalker Ranch, but paranormal really wasn't on my radar. It's not something I followed. I'd never read any of the books or watched any of the documentaries.
But what ended up happening is you found some ghosts as well. Am I right?
Well, that brings up an interesting thing, because even to this day, I know myself as well as other members of our team, when we hear the word paranormal, we kind of cringe a little bit. I tell people, if we could take a flashlight back 400 years, people would have thought that was pretty paranormal, the ability to call upon light, with the press of a button. And it was simply because they didn't understand the principles that were operating behind it. Now, we understand electricity a lot better. We understand there's nothing paranormal to a flashlight. And so the things that we have witnessed out at the ranch, when you talk about chasing ghosts, really what we're doing is chasing answers. And the paranormal as we deem it today, it's my hope that in 50 years we look back and kind of chuckle and think, isn't it funny that we thought that was paranormal?
How many years have you worked there now?
So I started working there in April of 2016. So going on 8 years.
And what were these coincidences that the first thing you experienced? Describe what it was.
My first visit out there really was to do a property inspection for them. And we were in the ranch house where the caretakers were living. And we were in the southeast bedroom of the house. We were all standing in there, and all of a sudden I started to get very lightheaded, dizzy, and the room started to spin. And I got so I had such vertigo that I actually backed up against the wall and then slid down the wall and was sitting, on the floor for a minute. And the individuals, the caretakers and Jim that were in there, they said, "Are you okay, Tom?" And I'm borderline hypoglycemic, so when my blood sugar starts to get low, I start to experience, lightheaded and a little vertigo and stuff. So I dismissed it as that, although I have to say that in the previous, 30 something years up to that point, I'd never experienced that spinning sensation of the room actually spinning. And to this day, here we are 8 years later, I've never experienced that sensation anywhere outside of the ranch. I have experienced it again at different locations on the ranch, but I've never experienced that sensation off the ranch. So at the time, I wrote it off as, I must have low blood sugar, and explained it away as that. And now as I look back, I'm like, well, I mean, if it was, how come that the room spinning has only ever happened on the ranch?
So I have a couple of your experiences documented, and we'll talk about that. But what I want you to talk about is, you mentioned before that you had some type of injury that you actually went to the hospital. They tried to figure out what it was, and they couldn't. So they told you, like, well, the good news is that, you are healthy, but bad news is that you're not healthy, and we cannot figure it, like something like that. So maybe explain.
Yeah, in March of 2017, I'd been on the ranch for about a year at that point. And during this period of time, I was doing some extensive excavation on the ranch, and trying to get some roads put in for security to do patrols. And it was over the weekend, I started to show some symptoms, some pains in the back of my head on the bottom here. As the weekend progressed and we rolled into Monday and Tuesday, they became so severe that my head started to, my head scalp detached from my skull. I had fluid that pushed up, as it pushed up, it separated the fatty tissue from my skull. And so by Tuesday morning, when my wife finally, I didn't let my wife take me to the emergency room up until Tuesday because I kept saying, well, maybe it's a spider bite, or I kept thinking maybe I got bit by like a black widow or something. And I figured it would pass. And then Tuesday morning, when she saw my head, and it had, by at that point, I had a dark purple line right across my head right here where it separated. And so by the time she got me up to the hospital and they started doing their stuff, it had completely come down into my eyes, and I could grab my hair and basically walk my scalp around. And yeah, they didn't, they ran 40 something different tests on me that week. It got to the point that my doctor actually told my wife that she needed to start preparing the family for this fact that I might not pull out of this, and that if I did pull out, I would probably have some severe, brain damage and be possibly in a vegetative state. And my labs, every single one of my labs came back perfect. And my doctor at one point told me I was the healthiest sick person that he had seen.
So what's the strangest thing other than what you've described? What is the strangest thing you guys have experienced there?
I would have to say the strangest thing that's happened so far happened this past summer as we were filming season 5, but I can't talk about that. So I'll just say that up to that point, it would have to be the night that we were doing the telescope experiment out on the helipad. And, we've tried many times to figure out what anomaly sits above the triangle there in the middle of the ranch. And so we decided to go very low tech and bring some telescopes out. And the whole premise of this experiment was that if there's some atmospheric anomaly or something, because we're seeing signals being broadcast from this place up in the sky, but there's nothing there that could be broadcast, at least nothing we could see, right? And so we figured, you know what, if there's something atmospheric up there that's causing this, then it would bend the light, much like if you held a glass of water up and somebody were to walk between you and the glass of water. As they walk behind the glass, you would see the light bend around the glass and disfigure. And so we thought, well, a low-tech way of being able to see that space up there about 5,000 feet above the triangle would be to get some telescopes. But what happened is that as we were setting up for the evening, we started to make a list of the stars that would be tracking directly overhead of us and going through that area. And those stars, I watched it with my own eyes. The telescopes are supposed to lock on. You find the star in the database, you lock onto it with the telescope, and then the telescope will track it as it goes across the sky. Right as that star starts to get to that anomaly, that area that we're interested in, the star disappeared off of the database, and the telescope would stop tracking. And like, what the heck? These aren't instruments that have any Wi-Fi or any connectivity. Like there's no way to get in there and change the database. All right. And all night long, as we were doing this experiment, we watched as one star after another disappeared off of the database. Only the stars that were tracking through that spot. No other stars disappeared off the menu. So it was very specific to only the ones we were interested in. And so they finally decided, you know what, if it's not going to track there automatically, we'll do it manually. So we'll track the telescope manually with our hands as it goes through. Well, what ended up happening is, as they tried to do it manually, the eyepiece on the telescope would go black. So you lift the telescope up, it would work, put the telescope down, it'd go black. So we were never able to track a single star through that anomaly.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. There's so much more I'd like to dive into, but unfortunately, we can't do that here thanks to the heavy censorship efforts from big tech. If you want to explore this topic further, you can dive deep by accessing our entire uncensored library on unified.tv. There's a link in the description below this video if you want to check it out. A membership to Unified TV gives you unlimited access to hundreds of uncensored podcasts, investigative journalism, documentaries, films, and content that was once available on major streaming platforms like Netflix, but is now banned from the internet. For just $14.99 a month, which is less than $1 a day, you get access to it all. Your subscription also helps keep the platform running free from censorship and corporate influence. Please consider supporting us and enjoy all of our unfiltered and thought-provoking content in return. Thank you very much, and I will see you on Unified TV.